Avengers, Marauders, Magic Beings, Soviets, Spider-Man. The hell aren't the X-Men fighting this week? Yeah, X-Men Versus seems to be the unintentional theme of the week. This week, I'm reading every X-Men comic ever. As I read Spider-Man vs. Wolverine, X-Men vs. Avengers, and Uncanny X-Men 220 to 223. Let's start with Spider-Man vs. Wolverine, written by the then main writer for Amazing Spider-Man, James C. Owsley, or as you may know him now, renowned comic book author Christopher Priest. This book is goddamn phenomenal. Our two leads, Wolverine and Spider-Man, actually get a pretty even amount of spotlight, which is super nice. I don't know if it's exactly 50-50, but it is a much better split than Fantastic Four vs. the X-Men, which, like I said in that video, had a significantly higher focus on the Fantastic Four. Spidey, I do think, has a slightly bigger focus, especially since the events of this story directly affect Spider-Man and his main book. I mean, Ned Leeds fucking dies. Yet, the story means next to nothing for the X-Men. Wolverine's story is weaved in quite well, though, and does carry some weight to it, which extends to the main plot at hand. That said, I did enjoy the Spider-Man parts more than the Wolverine ones. I think Pete's story in this is much more compelling, and maybe that's because of the aforementioned stakes, but also, he's Spider-Man. How can you not like Spider-Man? Especially 80s Spider-Man. He just has this immediate charm and relatability. I feel like if you hate Spider-Man, you're either one of his rogues, a newspaper editor, or current day Marvel editorial, who in all honesty could probably be considered villains at this point. For both Spider-Man and X-Men. I digress. Logan and Pete are in Germany going after a mysterious assassin by the name of Charlemagne, each for their own separate reasons. Pete is working with Bugle reporter Ned Leeds, Rip, hoping for a story about the assassin, whereas Logan was old friends and apparently lovers with Charlemagne a long time ago and is looking for her before she gets herself killed, which is ultimately her plan. Charlemagne being a woman and an ex-lover of Wolverine caught me completely off guard. Now, regardless of my surprise, I didn't find Logan's relationship with Charlemagne particularly compelling. It feels just kind of like something we've seen before, specifically like Yukio in Wolverine Volume 1. Even if those character beats aren't exactly the same for both women, it could also just be that since Charlemagne lives and dies in this book, there's kind of no reason to expand on their relationship beyond what was necessary. Despite that, though, everything else in this book is great. And the thing that really put it over the edge for me was the ending. The fight between Wolverine and Spidey is awesome, don't get me wrong, but the way it ends with Spider-Man punching Charlie in the face, full force, thinking it was Logan, is even more shocking than the reveal of Charlemagne herself. And then you have the panel being repeated every other row for 3 pages as Pete heads home. It works so well at conveying what he's feeling, just repeating the scene in his head over and over again, sitting in the guilt of what he did, despite it ultimately not being his fault. And then the hug with MJ at the end, it just pulls my heartstrings, man. This is just an incredible book with an equally as incredible ending. 9 out of 10. Go read this book. It's completely worth it. You won't be disappointed. Conversely, let's talk about X-Men vs. Avengers, the 4-issue miniseries by Roger Stern and Mark Silvestri. For some reason that I can't figure out, the team on this book completely changes for the last issue, with Tom DeFalco and Jim Shooter taking over as writers, with Keith Pollard taking over as lead artist. The story itself doesn't change that much, but it's just really weird that both the artist and writer change for the 4th issue of a mini-series. I just find that very odd. Maybe it's not, I don't know, but this entire book revolves around Mags getting some old equipment from remnants of Asteroid M and having a moral dilemma about using it to cure mutant hatred. Meanwhile, the Avengers just want to take him in for Trial of Magneto Round 2 because they didn't like the way the outcome of the first one went. And the Russians, mainly Crimson Dynamo, want Magneto dead because of his actions way back in Uncanny X-Men 150. And it takes putting innocent lives at danger in this revenge quest for the rest of the team of Soviets to realize they were in the wrong. I feel like there were probably signs before that, especially considering Dynamo is, a villain. Patriotism's a hell of a drug, I guess. The whole thing ends with the Avengers getting their wish after Magneto uses the device on the one guy who doesn't harbor any actual hate for mutants, which somehow convinces him that using said force isn't a viable option to turn bigots into not bigots. I understand the sentiment, sure, but I feel like there are a couple steps missing to get to that point from where Meg started. I also don't think it even proves the device works, because Cap just tanked that shit like Titanform Kuga and just proved that Steve is built different. The trial does not go well. In fact, it goes so poorly that Magneto resorts to using the device on the head judge right before sentencing to try and save his own skin. Only the helmet seemingly does nothing again, because despite the sentencing going in his favor, there is no evidence that it actually affected the outcome, and the humans hate mutants, especially Magneto, just as much as they did before, if not more. It's just mind-boggling, because the entire book, we're told the device works, and the only 2 times it's used, it seemingly doesn't. I think this ending is kind of neat. It's clearly setting up more animosity for mutants doing Fall of the Mutants. And I feel like there's a weird moral dilemma here that they're trying to put, but other than that, there isn't much that stuck with me out of this entire book. It's just kind of a 7 out of 10. A good book, but it just doesn't leave much of a lasting impression. From there, we can move on to Uncanny X-Men with issues 220 to 223, which of course are written by Claremont, but now with Mark Silvestri as the main artist for the book. However, we do get a guest artist with Carrie Gamble for issue 223. Our 2 main plots here are Storm looking for Forge and having teamed up with the clearly possessed Naze to do so, and then the rest of the X-Men heading to San Francisco to pick up Madeline Pryor and fight the Marauders again. The Storm plot is pretty intriguing. However, despite what we, the audience, are told, I don't think the pair are on an actual vision quest. I think Naze, or whoever is possessing him, is using some sort of magic to gaslight Storm into believing Forge is the one that's been corrupted instead. If you've read the book, this should be pretty obvious that this is what's happening, because Naze looks real creepy and real evil multiple times. This story very much feels like the story they used as inspiration for Storm's kind of life-death power re-get story post losing her powers in X-Men 97. However, I'm not expecting this version of the story to end with her getting her powers back. Unless, of course, when they find Forge, he has the fix waiting with him. Other than that, though, I loved the opening sequence in 220, clearly being a metaphor for Storm's past and present. And in case you forgot all about Storm and Forge and how things ended with them, this issue gives you a recap of the events of the original Life-Death issue in a very creative way. It makes Storm relive the exact moments she lived through while staying with Forge, thanks to his holographic projectors in his home, which I think is a very creative way of doing a recap that isn't just the characters telling the reader what happened, and it also allows said character in the present to comment on those events with a new perspective. Meanwhile, Wolverine and the X-Men are fighting for their lives, which seems to be a common occurrence nowadays, and San Francisco is once again a battleground for the X-Men shenanigans. 221 and 222 are pretty much all action. That said, we do get some good moments within that action. Daz saving Rogue and learning to let go of the beef she still has with Rogue is phenomenal. I love the love Allison's been getting right now in this series. Do I wish she was getting this type of treatment into her own book? Yes, but better late than never, I suppose. Side note, turns out Daz is older than Rogue, which makes said beef pretty funny in retrospect. We also had the Polaris Malice Marauder reveal to the X-Men, and more importantly, Havoc, which went about as well as I expected. Speaking of Polaris, shout out to this fucking dipshit who tried to shoot her with a .44 Magnum, and of course the bullet ricochets and hits fellow cop. And before anyone says anything, he should have known that the gun wouldn't work, because he just saw Polaris disassemble his fucking car right in front of him, and then still decided to attempt to shoot her anyway. fucking moron. Couple more minor things. The Brotherhood gets a few new members within the form of the 3 old people that Storm fought before. Maddie and Alex have this great bonding moment about significant others. Rogue just looks good in the jacket no matter what her actual look is. Oh, and I guess we do have the first actual appearance of Mr. Sinister. Now, I know technically we've already seen him covered in classic X-Men, but I read super far ahead for that video because I wanted to cover the entire series in one go, so that technically doesn't happen for another 2 years, despite it being a flashback to what happened like 20 years ago in universe. I will say, his reveal is kinda awesome, and not only because it's Mr. Sinister, he's a major X-Men villain, but he confirms that he's behind the whole Maddie plot, which I kind of had already put together thanks to all the info we've received in both X Factor and Uncanny X-Men. But then also, he just beats the shit out of Sabretooth. It's kind of deserved, but it's also kind of awesome. All in all, these 4 Uncanny X-Men issues have been some of the best in the series in a while, especially consecutively. Great action, great art, great characters, just an all-around great time. And I feel like that's saying something, because this book has been pretty damn good for a while. So these 4 issues being that much better than the rest should tell you something. Well, I think that's everything this week. I'm sorry this video was a bit late. Life happened. But next week should be back to normal, and is the final week before Fall of the Mutants, and we are covering the 8-issue Fallen Angels miniseries. So, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you then.